Here's my prediction. I think a lot of Street Fighter 5 players are going to hate. Here's my brutal hot take regarding the game. I think a lot of people that are really good at Street Fighter 5, if not really love Street Fighter 5, aren't going to like this shit.
So yeah, let's talk about this. Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. MC Mura here, and while I typically don't talk or discuss really the opinions of the others, this little clip and this hot take actually led to a ton of discussion over on my Discord, and I've seen a lot of people talk about it on Twitter as well, and I thought it was actually a really interesting point of discussion and something that is worth discussing, all things considered. Now let me first start by saying that I really respect Max and I really respect his opinion, right? It's a very courageous hot take, to be honest, but I can see where he's coming from, and I want to say that even if I disagree with Max here, this isn't a video that is attacking him or like invalidating his opinion. He's obviously clearly free to say what he thinks, and I will say what I think as well. Now his point of view is that the game is totally different to Street Fighter 5, and that is very normal by the Street Fighter standard, right? Street Fighter 2 was different to Alpha, Alpha to 3, 3 to 4, 5 to 6. Each one of them has their own unique mechanics, art style, and even general themes, and even the soundtrack. So it is obviously designed for different people and different tastes, and that is one thing about Street Fighter that have always made it unique in my opinion among the other fighting games, is that most of the other series are iterative, right? So for example, Tekken 6 to Tekken 7, it's a very iterative game, while Street Fighter will change its skin from one like installment to the other. So what Max is saying is that Street Fighter 6 is totally different to Street Fighter 5, and in that there is a good chance that the players who love Street Fighter 5 and are really good at it may not enjoy Street Fighter 6. And I think that is valid, right? I think there is a point there to be made. However, I do also think there is a lot of grain. You know how I say take it with a grain of salt? I think there is a ton of salt in this statement, and allow me to explain why. The first point is that the build that they played out of Street Fighter 6 at the Summer Game Fest, this build will be totally different to what you will see at the launch of the game, right? And this happened with every game I could remember, and the perception of the games can change over time as well, right? Because I remember that during the early days of Street Fighter Cross Tekken, when the people got to play it for the first time, including Max, and I remember my Cross as well, they were talking about how amazing this game is, how fun it is, but obviously the launch Cross Tekken that we got had a ton of issues, right? And this also goes for even games like Street Fighter 5, because Street Fighter 5, if you played any of the beta, if you've seen how the game was in the earlier builds, it was totally different to what we got at the end. So don't get too attached to anything you see in Street Fighter 6 right now. Remember that the game is still being made, everything is prone to changing, so you have to keep that in mind. The other thing that I find to be pretty interesting here is the overall perception of Street Fighter 5 and the perception of the fan base. Unfortunately, to this day, there is the idea that Street Fighter 5 is just flowchart against your opponent and go for a shimmy 50-50, and a lot of people think that this is just the game. While I do think obviously over the seasons Capcom did a lot to make the game much more neutral based. They added a lot of defensive options. Obviously V-Shift was actually really big. They did nerf the V-Trigger activations, they did nerf the crush counters. The game in my opinion is very neutral based. Offense is still obviously pretty strong, but neutral is very important at the moment in Street Fighter 5, and I would even have players like Daigo who's saying that he thinks that Street Fighter 5 is too defensive at the moment, which is an interesting take for Daigo as well. So the idea and the perception of Street Fighter 5 is of it like being just a game where you get to knock down and then you get to flowchart your meaty versus opponent, that isn't really true in my opinion, right? Now the other thing that I also think is pretty important is we haven't actually seen Street Fighter 6. And this is something that you have to be very aware of. What you're seeing right now isn't anywhere near what the game will end up being, and you have to be very aware of this. Games certainly have honeymoon phases, right? And when you start off a new game and you start playing it, you are just playing what you're used, right? You're not really playing the game as it's supposed to be played. One of the biggest examples in all of the footage we're seeing is that we haven't seen anyone actually tick throw, for example, right? And this is a pretty big deal, because you know that if people are trying to mash parries, well, throws are actually gonna be very impactful in the game. We haven't seen a character with a general zoning game plan. We haven't seen a grappler. We haven't seen if the game have like strong anti-airs. I noticed that when you hit the opponent out of the air, if they're in a counter hit state, they are in a juggle state, and that is something that you have to be very aware of. We've also seen that when you hit someone during recovery, they get to be hit with what's called like punish counter, and it seems like they're eating counter hit damage, because this is also something that I have seen regarding the game. A lot of people are being very worried that the game have a very strict, it seems, combo structure, and it doesn't seem like there is a lot of varieties in the combos that you can do. Also, a lot of talk about how you can't like super cancel specials into level 1 super. I think all of that stuff is subject to change, but the point I'm trying to say is we haven't actually played Street Fighter 6 yet. The game still doesn't have a meta. We still haven't seen the optimal way that the game is supposed to be played. The drive impact, the big flashy attacks, that like the focus attack, where if you watch any of the Street Fighter 6 footage, people are spamming left and right. Trust me on this one, if this thing launched the way it is right now, it's almost going to be useless in high level gameplay, because this is a very easy parry on reaction, right? And obviously you get punished for it. And there is a lot of concerns that the game might be too defensive, that maybe you are going to risk a lot if you're trying to stick out a button. But again, we have to get our hands on it collectively as a community and play it to actually understand what is going on. Street Fighter 6 is not a game that is solved, right? So to say that players who like Street Fighter 5 may not like Street Fighter 6, obviously there is something to be said there, but like I said, Street Fighter 6 is still the unknown. It's still not a game that you can say this is how Street Fighter 6 plays, right? It's way too early to even talk about this. And I will say I love Street Fighter 5, right? I really like Street Fighter 5, but there are things about Street Fighter 5 that I'm gladly gonna leave behind, right? I don't want anything to do with that netcode. I don't want to play Street Fighter 5 online anymore, right? And if Street Fighter 6 is gonna give me good netcode, I'm not gonna lose to people who are just dashing into my face, into attacks. That's gonna be great. If I don't have to deal with a ton of neutral skipping tools, that's great. Just because you like Street Fighter 5 doesn't mean that you love every aspect of it, right? And if you hate Street Fighter 5, this doesn't mean that every aspect of it is bad, and the same goes for Street Fighter 6. These games are usually a lot more than just the mechanics. Now, in my opinion, at least for me personally, I am pretty excited for Street Fighter 6. I want to get my hands on it, and I want to play it, and I want to see how the meta will develop, right? And I want to be a part of that. But I don't think I'm gonna hate it right out of the gate, right? Because I don't remember ever hating a Street Fighter game. As long as the game in its core is Street Fighter, I think it's gonna be alright. At least that is for me. But let me know your thoughts. And going into the new game, expect it to be different, but still have somewhat of familiarity that you can attach to, right? Give it a chance, see how it plays out, see how it blossoms, see how the meta develops, and then we can talk about liking Street Fighter 6 or not coming from Street Fighter 5. If you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like or a comment, it helps the channel so much. I will be leaving a link to the Patreon, Discord, Twitter and Twitch pages in the description below. Thank you very much for watching and stay safe.